Hi there, my name is Sarah Whitaker and I'm an educational technology expert. And today I want to talk about online classes and what are the three elements that make for an effective online class. So, again, I work with higher education students, but this can apply for high school and some aspects can actually apply for the primary students as well. So when I'm thinking about my online classes and I'm preparing my online class, the number one thing that I want to keep in mind is communication. Now, some of you might be thinking, wait a minute. What about your PowerPoint presentation? What about the content? And I'm like, yeah. No, that's secondary. The number one thing to make an effective online class with your students is communication. And it's not your communication to the students, but their communication back to you as well. It has to be a two-way conversation. So communication is super important, and that is the number one thing that you want to keep in mind in all aspects of your planning. How can your students communicate with you, and how are you communicating with your students in the class? Number one tool that you want to use, that chat room. The chat room is going to become your best friend. It is the place where students can ask questions, they can interrupt you without actually interrupting you, without unmuting themselves and talking over you. And it's just the place that it's going to be where everything is happening. For some reason, even for adult learners, even for teachers that I teach, people are more comfortable asking questions in the chat room. When I give them the opportunity, unmute yourself, ask me a question. Most, I think 80% of the time, they don't unmute themselves and they just ask the question in the chat room, which is totally fine. Then I just read out the question and I answer it. That's one of the key elements. Make sure that you're reading the question and you're answering the questions, or you're saying some of the comments in the chat room. So always keep an eye in the chat room. And if one of your students is making a funny joke or making a comment and you want, like, it's appropriate to share it. So to let them know, like, hey, I'm engaging with you. I got my eye on the chat room. I'm monitoring it. Let the chat room go as it needs to go in the classroom. But obviously you want to try to keep it on topic and on what you're discussing, but encourage your students to use the chat room. The second tool that you want to use in your class is the reactions or emojis. So if your virtual online software has reactions, this is great. So a place like where your students can actually raise their hands or to say if they're sad or if they're happy or if they're confused. If they don't have this, don't worry. Use the emojis. And just establish some kind of etiquette during the class, like, hey, if you need me to stop, put this emoji up. If you're confused, put this emoji. Or just ask your students, how are you feeling? And get them to use their emoji to express themselves. Emojis are super fast and easy for your students to communicate with you. They don't have to write out a sentence. They don't have to worry about spelling. They don't have to worry about, thinking too much. They can just react. And that's the really great thing about using emojis in the class. So I highly encourage the use of emojis. They're not a bad thing. It keeps the flow of the class going as well, especially when you want the reaction to something very quickly. You don't want to have to wait for everybody to write out their sentence and how they're feeling when they can just do a simple click. The third tool for communication that you want to use is the poll feature. Now, unlike the chat room, polls are a little bit more formal and they're collected, and usually in your virtual learning environment, you can collect the polls, you can display the results as a percentage or as a pie chart or some sort of way. And also you can keep that data for later. So if you need to review it after the class and kind of just review and say, okay, yeah, that students weren't really getting that idea, or they weren't really feeling great about that aspect of the class, I'm gonna have to rethink about how I'm presenting this or how I'm explaining something. So the polls are just a little bit more formal than the chat room. But again, if your virtual online learning environment doesn't have a poll feature, you can use other tools, or you can just use the chat room for your students to react to the poll question. So what we have for communication is we have the chat, we have emojis or reactions, and we have the poll tool. Simple things that you can use right from the beginning and get your communication levels going up higher in your online class. Remember, your online class should not just be you lecturing to your computer screen. You want your online classes for you to be communicating with your students as much as possible.